nicest and biggest houses that weren't the commanding officer's house were built. Again, it's the same thing. They use standard Army architecture blueprints, so a lot of the houses look the same, both on the outside and the inside. The only different one is the one down on the end that was eventually broken up into apartments for lower ranking officers without families, because they still needed nicer places for the officers to live, but they didn't need the bigger spaces. So the ones kind of that you can see here, they're all pretty similar. They are brick construction, duplex houses, so they have porches on either side, nice white porches. There are some slight differences, but every house is uniform with each other. So both apartments on each house will be the same. Again, insides, all the same. These were built because after the American Civil War, recruitment was going down. Because it's the first photographed war, and people could no longer get by on just telling stories of glory and heroism. People were starting to actually understand the grotesqueness, the gravity of the situation. And they were finding that recruitment was going down. So what they did was they made it both easier to get promotions. They're now starting to do more merit-based promotions instead of you paid to be an officer, as well as building really nice houses for these men. So you could get good housing, your families would be set up, and it was easier for you to get a promotion, which meant more status in the world. So this is here in its waterfront property until they start to build up the island. Just after World War I, as they're digging up more subways, they're taking the landfill that they dug up from the 456 Lexington Avenue line, double cleaned it, double dredged it, and started to form it out this way on the island. This is where we get the kind of rounded triangle cone shape at the end of the island. As it's settling, they're using it for air shows. We have Ruth Law, who is a very famous female pilot, come out here. She did a lot of flights from here. The Wright brothers flew a contest for the Fulton Festival out here. So we have some big names in early aviation are coming out to Governor's Island to do shows. What happens is, this is around the time that Mayor LaGuardia is looking to build his airport. He goes first to Floyd Bennett Field, but because the Navy was already using it, he couldn't do anything out there. The Army was technically not yet using this land, so he was starting to kind of put in the motions to make his civilian airport at the back end of an Army base. That's a logistical nightmare, and the Army wanted to do everything they could to stop it. What comes from that is the building behind us, known as Liggett Hall. It is a very long brick and stone structure with about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 or so entrances and exits. On this back end, it cuts the island almost in half. This is where the new island starts. They built it to match as best they could the construction of this, so it all looks very uniform. However, it now goes from waterfront property for these officers to they're staring at the back end of a dormitory for privates. It was the longest human-occupied building on an Army base before the Pentagon. The Pentagon now beats us by a couple hundred feet or so. This is the size of the Chrysler Building laid down. And the reason it's so big is the Army had to prove they were using a majority, or were planning on using a majority of this land in order to stop LaGuardia from putting the airport out here. So they laid the foundations for Liggett Hall while the land was still settling. So they kind of put it down, fingers crossed, and once they knew it was safe, they built the building up. It is a gorgeous building, but it does kind of defeat the purpose of Colonel's Row. The building just to the left of it was put in later. It became the headquarters for the Women's Army Corps. There was an outpost of the Women's Army Corps here after World War II in 1946. This whole area of the island was designed to make it so that they'd technically never have to leave the island. Everything they needed was here. They were allowed to leave, of course, But that's, again, this building had a gym, it had a mess hall, it had a recreation room. When it became available, they'd put TVs and radios in here and everything. It became home for thousands of soldiers. But it used to be waterfront property for officers. And I love that story. Are there any questions? All right.